Hi, my name is Jen and I'm an addict.
Hi, Jen.
Okay. So I was going to dress up really nice like everybody else, but I wanted to be comfortable and didn't want to, so.
We can't see you anyway.
Oh, shut up. I don't make fun of how ugly everyone is. So yeah, I'm Jenna, I'm an addict. I'm a little bit nervous. So I'll just jump right into my story. I was raised in a home that was filled with a lot of anger and rage. There was a lot of emotional abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse. And I was an only child, right? So there wasn't a lot of escape for me. Most of it was, within. I used to play games a lot by myself, which was great because I always won. But I think my very first escape was books. I used to read a lot. And I think I was maybe 6 or 7 years old the first time I read the Narnia series. And that was always kind of my dream, to escape to another world. I had another escape though. All the great aunts in my family were nuns, and they lived in a convent not far from my house. So when things got really shitty at home, I got to go to the convent, and the nuns always treated me so well. They would always take me to McDonald's and buy me all the candy that I wanted, and I like candy. So I didn't really understand as a young child that wasn't normal. That's not how you were supposed to raise your children. My very best friend, he lived right next door to me, and his household was very much the same way. And we were kind of used to having to take time off of school because we'd be covered in bruises, or not being able to go outside and play because something was broken, and I used to think I was luckier than him because he ended up with a lot of broken bones and I never did, right? So I always thought I didn't have it as bad as him. And my dad was an alcoholic and an addict. I don't ever remember seeing him drink when I was young, and there was always pot around the house, but I never really considered that drugs. It was just so normal in my house. But I do remember every once in a while the big book would come out and be on the coffee table, and everything would be kind of happy sappy around our house for a while, and then we didn't talk about that, and the book went away, and things got dark and angry again. I actually didn't know, I didn't remember a lot of things from my childhood. I know my memories of my sexual abuse didn't come out actually until just before I think I came into recovery the first time, but I do remember attending a Christmas party with another fellowship, and I was about 10 years old, and I remember a man doing inappropriate things to me in the coat room at this party. And as an adult, when I was introduced to 12-step fellowships, shit like this kind of freaked me out, right? And when I first came in, my daughter, I'm gonna cry. My daughter was a baby, so I was terrified, right? And I kept her really close to me. But anyway, so I don't know, I was just a regular teenager, I thought, right? I never really fit in, which is kind of a common theme around here. I was on every single sports team, including the basketball team. But I also hung out, with the stoners in the back of the school and rode my skateboard. And I was part of the book club. And, I kind of fit in everywhere, but didn't really fit in anywhere. And nothing was ever good enough school-wise, right? I had honors all the way up until high school. And, the answer or the question at home was, what happened to the other 10% or whatever it was, right? And so that feeling of never being good enough was always there. I think, honestly, I don't remember my first drink or my first drug. I was a teenager. My boyfriend, when I was 15, he had a car, right? So we used to drive around and hotbox the car and stuff like that. And I don't really remember my first drink. I remember the first time I blacked out. I was a friend's work Christmas party, and I remember getting there, and then I remember waking up on my best friend's floor in her living room, and that was not my ominous warning. That was, maybe I should drink more water next time. I don't know. But I felt like we were just regular teenagers and we were just doing our thing, and I was 15 years old and I was dating a 17-year-old, right? He was an older guy. And he was in the wrong place at the wrong time, and he was murdered. And I didn't know how to deal with that. He was shot in the back of the head, and I just got the phone call in the middle of the night by his sister, and she just said, "You need to come to the hospital before we take him off life support." And that was 4 days before my 16th birthday, and it was 2 days before his 18th birthday, and that was the last day that I went to high school. I didn't know how to deal with that, right? In my house, we didn't talk about our feelings. You just didn't deal with feelings, right? Sorry. So, I don't know, it was a month or two after Scott had died, and I got really good at hiding in my room, and I had a record player, and I used to play Comfortably Numb over and over and over and cry. And one night my dad came down to my room, and he just kind of busted in the door, and he said, "You need to get over this shit." And that was it, right? And so I had to figure out how to get over this shit. So unbeknownst to my parents, I used to get up every single morning and get ready for school, and I'd take the bus to the school, but we had this little pool hall right on 107th Ave in Edmonton there, and it's actually a daycare now, which is kind of funny. But we had this little pool hall there, and they used to sell beers for $2 and cigarettes for $1, and I would play pool all day, and it didn't take me long to figure out that if I bought a gram of pot and I rolled 4 joints out of it, I'd have enough to buy the gram the next day, and so that's all I did was I hung out at the pool hall, and eventually, the grams turned into ounces, and so I started dealing pot, and it was a couple months. I think Scott died in April, and I don't think my parents found out that I wasn't actually going to school until the end of that semester, and I started going to parties, and I was drinking a lot, and I didn't understand it at the time that I was trying to mask my feelings, right? I had no idea how to deal with this death. But there was a succession of running away from home and blacking out drunk, and I remember my father trying to drag me out of a party one time, and it was just a bad scene, and all I cared about was that I was embarrassed in front of these cool kids, right? Like, these were like adults that I was partying with. And eventually, I got into trouble with the cops. I got arrested for an armed robbery, and I was underage, so I ended up going to the kiddie jail. But the guy who'd murdered my boyfriend, he was already in that jail, so I had to stay in solitary confinement. And my parents were trying to teach me a lesson, so they didn't pick me up for 3 weeks. But I didn't understand that any of this was like bad behavior, right? Because I started hanging out with like worse and worse people, so this was all just normal behavior. I was cool, right? Like now I had a criminal record and stuff. But eventually I left home, and surprise, surprise, I got pregnant at 17. So I pulled up my bootstraps a bit, and I decided, I need to make something of myself, and I was going to finish high school, and they had this correspondence type of program, whatever, and I ended up graduating high school with honors. I was 17 years old, and my son was born, but lucky enough I had some amazing support from my son's grandmother, and she taught me how to be a mother, right? And so now I'm kind of stuck in this world where I don't really fit in with anybody, right? I'm a very young mother. None of my friends obviously have children. I'm staying at home all the time. And I distinctly remember one day I was coming home from the grocery store, and I'm walking through the parking lot, and there's a liquor store there, and I thought, it'd be kind of nice to pass the time with a couple of beers, right? And I've thought about that moment many, many, many times. And so, that's what I did for a couple of years. I ended up going to college, but that's what I would do every night, right? I'd stop at the liquor store, and I'd come home, and I would drink. And I was lonely, and I was very, very unhappy, but all I knew is that I was a mother, and I needed to take care of this child, and I needed to do better for myself, right? I always surrounded myself with men who were a lot like my father, very angry, violent men. I wanted to be accepted by men, right? I never felt accepted by my father, and so that's always what I was seeking. So I was in a bunch of shitty relationships, right? And I went through a really dark period. I was in and out of psych wards, and a couple failed suicide attempts, and there was one suicide attempt that it wasn't so much the attempt, but it was what would happen. I'll explain it to you. But somebody had mentioned, like last week or something, that the Sunday morning speaker is a spiritual speaker, and I was like, fuck, I need to get spiritual fast. But when I think about moments in my life where God was there, this one, he definitely was. And I think I'd spent 2-3 weeks in the psych ward at the U of A, and I had been out for like a month or something like that. Obviously I had not learned my lesson, because of course I lied. I never talked about my drinking, and at this point in my life, like the worst drugs I did was pot. Like I was always going to stay away from the hard drugs, because that's what my father did, and I didn't want to be like my father. And so I had it all planned out. I went to like the Canadian Tire or whatever, and I had the plastic and the duct tape, and I had the dryer hose, and I had my car all rigged up, so that I was going to kill myself in my car. And I had a shit ton of sleeping pills and a whole bunch of booze, and I drove out of town and had a full tank of gas, and this is what I was going to do. And I don't even remember if I wrote a note or not, but anyway, unbeknownst to me, when you take a shit ton of sleeping pills, you hallucinate. And I can remember being in the car. I didn't think this through either, right? Because I'm drinking a whole bunch of booze, and then I gotta smoke, right? But I don't like all the smoke in the car, so I gotta keep opening the window. It's letting all the carbon monoxide out, but I remember there was a certain point, though, where I kept thinking that there was somebody in the car with me, right? And at certain points, it was the guy that I was dating, and it was other people, and I kept getting out of the car and chasing these people around the car, and it was just like this whole fucking scene, right? And I wake up the next morning, and I'm in my car, and it's out of gas, and there's fucking vomit everywhere in my car, and I'm still alive, right? So I have to walk back home, and I was like 2 or 3, it was a 2 or 3 hour walk just to get into the city limits. It took me like 6 or 7 hours to walk home, and I'm super fucking hungover, and I have not accomplished what I set to accomplish. And I get home, and I get myself in the shower, and my son he was not there. I must have asked somebody to take care of him. I can't quite remember, but I remember I get out of the shower, and there's a knock at the door, and it's the RCMP, and they found my car, and obviously they figure out what was going on, and they had dogs there, and they had tracked me, and they kept questioning me because they wanted to know who else was there. They said the dogs picked up another set of tracks, but there was nothing leading in and there was nothing leading out. And it took me a long time to realize that was God. I had no idea at the time. I couldn't understand why the cops were just bothering me, right? So my life went just kind of blah for a while, right? Lots of heavy drinking and suicide attempts, and then I met this guy. A lot of my stories start with I met this guy. But I met this guy, and we had a really great relationship for a long time. And he used to always just kind of, sort of, a little bit nag me about my drinking. Not too much, though. I didn't understand the drug world at all, right? And he used to disappear for 2 or 3 days at a time with some very vague, weird excuse, but I loved him, right? So I just believed whatever he said. And long story short, we had a baby girl together, and I moved up north to be with him, and the nagging about my drinking got worse and worse and worse, and so one day he went into town to go get groceries or whatever, right? And I'm waiting for him to bring back the booze, right? Like I told him to get me the most amount, whatever it was, right? And he comes back with a 6-pack, and he's drinking one, and I'm fucking pissed, right? There's no liquor store in our town, right? Like you have to buy off sales at the bar or whatever, right? And I am just absolutely fucking livid because, I didn't know it, or I didn't want to believe it at the time, but I'm a full-blown alcoholic, and you can't bring me 5 fucking beer. And instead he offers me something else, and it's crack, right? And I didn't really understand what it was or what it was going to do or anything like that, but he offers it to me, and I'm thinking, okay. And I remember, like, I'll never forget the first time I ever smoked crack. It was fucking amazing, right? And I just wanted that over and over and over again. And we had no money. We had 5 kids, and we had no money. And we decided to have a garage sale one day. We were going to sell a bunch of our stuff. And, So I'm digging through a bunch of boxes, trying to find stuff to sell in this garage sale, and I find this big box, and I open it up, and it's full of all these books and these key tags and these little coins and shit, right? And I'm wondering, what the hell is this stuff? And I start looking through it, you know, and he fucking grabs that box out of my hands, and he's just like, never mind that, you know. And we ended up selling this old car that we had for $200, and I think that, I remember those $200 bills, I think they were in my hand maybe a minute, you know. And, you know, I was only smoking crack for, I don't know, maybe 4 months, maybe 6 months, somewhere around there. And I was scared. I was scared of how it made me feel. I was scared of how much I loved it, you know. And we were seeing a counselor at the time, and we were doing couples counseling or whatever, and one time he had to work or something and he wasn't there, and I felt like I was betraying him, but I asked the counselor, you know, can I go to like some kind of rehab or something? Like, I'm really scared of where my life is going. So, you know, I signed up to go, and I went, and I remember how apprehensive he was, right? Like, the week before I had to go, right? He was just not himself. But I just thought he was worried about me going. I think our daughter was 9 months, 10 months at the time, something like that. So I just thought he was just worried about being alone with the baby. And, you know, and I go off to treatment. And I remember my very first meeting. I think I checked in on the Monday. The CA meeting is on Tuesday night. And I remember when they read, "Who is a cocaine addict?" And I remember thinking, I am not that fucking bad. You know, like, I was the school librarian in my small town. I was the stay-at-home mom with 5 kids, right? Like, I just smoked crack on the weekends. But it scared me, you know, and the very first person that I heard share was Kevin, you know, and he talked about being a back alley junkie. And that's not who I was, and I thought, like, this is going to get way worse. So I remember being really apprehensive, like, which fellowship do I go in, right? Like, I really like to drink, but I was smoking crack. Like, which one do I go in? You guys scared the shit out of me, right? Talking about needles and shit like that. Like, I didn't do that. You know, but... after being in treatment for 3 weeks, you know, it gave me a break from reality. You know, it let me go into that pink cloud place, and I decided I wasn't going home because the crack dealer, he was our next door neighbor, right? And I wasn't going to go home. And I decided to stay in Edmonton, and you know, there was this guy in CA who was an old friend of my daughter's dad, and every time I'd go to a meeting, he kept slipping me like $20. He'd be like, "Here, just take this," you know? And I was like, who the fuck is this creepy old guy? But I'm really grateful that he did that, right? He really helped me feel like maybe I did belong here. So anyway, you know, this became my fellowship. I stayed in Edmonton. I brought my kids. My ex actually checked himself into detox, and we started changing our lives. You know, I did everything that they told me to do in this fellowship, and I got a sponsor, and I did my steps, and I started being of service. I was going to 3 meetings a day. At that time, our central office had an AA meeting in the morning, a nooner, and then an evening meeting. Actually, when I first started, we used to have a 10 o'clock meeting on Saturdays, and I think Friday and Saturday nights. Yeah, 4 meetings. And like, I just dove right in, right? And I was just 100%. I did not want to go back to being fucking scared all the time. I did a shit ton of service. You know, area meetings used to be fucking Kevin with everything written in triplicate, screaming and yelling, and, you know, those good times, and I really loved it. And I had this really good group of men around me, you know, Big Al and his little posse that he always had, and I finally belonged somewhere, right? one of the things, though, I always felt I was really fucking scared all the time. It was a different kind of fear, though, right? But I was really scared of screwing up. You know, after, 6 months, 9 months, a year, I'm starting to sponsor women. I'm going to meetings all the time. And at that time, like, we didn't have very many women, Our Nadine was one of them, but we didn't have very many women in C8 Edmonton at that time. And I was starting to be scared to tell people about how I really felt, about my fears, about having using thoughts, anything like that, right? Because I was supposed to be recovered. And I can't remember exactly when it happened. I think it was summer or something. I got into a car accident, and it was actually kind of funny because we were on our way to a CA meeting, the CA Nooner, and I was the chips and lit person at the time, and my trunk was full of chips and lit, and I got fucking rear-ended. The guy was doing like 70 or whatever, and my trunk exploded, and there's CA literature like all over the place. Yeah, it was funny. I remember Garbage Can Gary running around picking up all the pamphlets so we wouldn't lose them. But yeah, after that car accident, I remember going to the doctors and I had whiplash and hurt my hip and all this stuff, and the doctor said, well, here's some Percocets. And I said, okay, the whole time I'm like, they're prescribed, right? The doctor's prescribing them to me. I've been in an accident. I'm supposed to take them, but I'm ignoring this voice that's back there going, yeah, And honestly, timelines really suck for me. I don't really remember how long I was on them for. But they stopped being prescribed and started buying them. And my partner that I was with at the time was trying very hard to help me control the amount that I was taking. But, I wanted more. I wanted more and more and more. And there was one day where it's one of those thoughts, right? And it was the most brilliant fucking thought in the world. And I had remembered a couple months prior, I was sick or had the flu or something like that, and I remember, taking an extra big swig off of that bottle of cough syrup, and it gave me a little buzz, and I remembered that. And when I ran out of pills, I started drinking cough syrup, and I think by the time I finally stopped with the cough syrup, I was drinking like 4 or 5 bottles of cough syrup a day. I was so scared of what you guys were gonna think of me. I remember I took my 3-year cake high as fuck. And I'm standing at the podium and I'm crying worse than this. I am like ugly crying. And there's this voice in my head and it's screaming, just tell them the truth. I didn't tell the truth. I couldn't do it. My ego was so big. And I was dying inside. And I couldn't tell you. So then it wasn't long after that I did get honest. I believe it was at the camp out. And I got honest with a few people there. But I didn't stop. And, it wasn't long after that I went back to my first love, which was drinking. And I was still going to meetings here and there. I was still trying to keep up this persona for some fucking reason. I don't know why. Eventually, my partner finally told me that he couldn't be with me because I was in full-blown relapse. And it was so fucking hard to go to meetings. So fucking hard. I tried to go for a while. I honestly tried. And, after me and the ex broke up, that's when people come to you and they tell you what they really think and what they really feel. And whether it was true or not, and I honestly don't know and I don't care today, but, people told me rumors about cheating and stuff like that, and it was once again another blow to my ego, right? And it became impossible for me to walk into the rooms of CA anymore. So then I didn't really belong anywhere, right? I just started trying to live life the best that I could with the tools that I had learned, right? And does anybody have a tissue? So I don't know if any of you, thank you. I don't know if any of you have ever experienced this, but a belly full of booze and a head full of big book, it's a really fucking shitty place to be. It's fun, let me tell you, because you can tell everybody else how they can stop. And up until this point in my life, I'd been drinking for a while. I decided to move in with some family members that were pretty hard drinkers, right? So now it was kind of normal. And up until that point in my life, I had never done cocaine before. I'd heard all you guys talk about it, but I'd never done it before. And I started dating a bunch of bikers and stuff like that, and I'd always see the coke going around, and I was always like, I can't, fuck. I used to be part of Cocaine Anonymous. I can't do that. And I remember the very first time I ever tried coke, and it was like a big deal to me. Like, I had to do this properly, and I don't know. It was kind of funny. And of course, I was disappointed. I was very disappointed in it, to be honest with you, because you can't really go from crack to coke, right? It just, I don't know. But of course, I did it, and lots of it, for a few years. And I was constantly trying to use steps 4 and 5 and 8 and 9 in my life without actually, being abstinent or doing any other steps, But I thought if I could do those, I could still just kind of fuck my way through life. But the fact of the matter is I ended up quitting cocaine, right? And I thought, well, I'm obviously not an addict because I've quit using cocaine. But I didn't. See, when I first started, I was hanging out with lots of bikers, getting really good coke, and by the end, I was picking it up from some 18-year-old Asian guy on the corner, so I actually quit doing baby laxatives, not cocaine. And there were certain times in that period where I really tried to make an honest effort, and I'd come back to meetings a little bit here and there. But I was scared. It was all about ego for me, 100% about ego. And there was a couple couple times in there where like life was just absolutely fucking horrific. There was one time I was doing a whole bunch of coke and I was drinking and my daughter was over and I don't even know what happened, but I hit her and I hit her hard. And I called her dad to come get her. You know, she's like this big, 3 or 4 years old, 5, I don't know. And as soon as he came to get her, you know, I just went crazy and I drank myself into oblivion and did whatever coke that I had. And when I finally woke up, I couldn't remember what had happened the night before. And I thought that I killed her. And I'm running around my house trying to figure out what I did with her. And it took me 2 days to go look at my car because I thought maybe I had put her in the trunk of my car. You know, I don't know how bad psychosis can get, but that was pretty fucking bad for me. But I still kept on using, right? I can remember one time, you know, she asked me, her dad is a member of Narcotics Anonymous and he's 14 years clean. This girl, she knows the program. And I can remember one time she came to me and she's like, Mom, please get the help that you need. Please. I couldn't do it. Anyway, I tried to do the geographical change and I moved across the country. And I stopped doing coke and I moved to Moncton, New Brunswick. You know, apparently you can't quit drinking there. I actually sought out an addictions counselor while I was there because shit was getting even worse while I was out there. And I was just talking about this morning, and this addictions counselor, she offered me some kind of drug that I could take it and still drink, but it was supposed to reduce the craving. You know, and thank God I had a different voice in my head that time, and this time the voice said, "You will fucking die if you do that." And it was just, once again, you know, I wake up from a blackout and I'm lying on the kitchen floor in a pile of my own vomit. And I said out loud, I was like, what the fuck am I going to do? And it was literally God that said it to me. And he said, you need to go home. And so it took me a few days to get some shit together and get some money together. And I decided to come home. And it was actually, he wasn't even a friend of mine. My son used to work with his brother. But he had found out that I was trying to get home and that I didn't have any money. And he got a hold of me and he said, I don't have money to pay for your plane ticket, but I have air miles. If you want to come home, I'll bring you home. And, you know, this person is, I barely even knew him. I think I met him once, right? But it was like one of those things, I kind of remembered what it was like to help somebody else, right? And I didn't end up taking him up on his offer. I decided to drive. And I drove from Moncton to somewhere in Northern Ontario. And it was raining, and I let my dogs out to go pee, and before I let them back in the truck, I wanted to wipe their little paws, and like a very good alcoholic that I am, I used to stash booze everywhere. And I'm digging through my bags to try and find a towel, and I find a beer. And I swear to God, the whiskey and the milk, that story flashed through my mind. But then I thought, it's just one, it can't hurt me. And so I came to, in Yorkton, Saskatchewan, the RCMP were tapping on my window. I don't know what happened. I don't know how I got the extra booze. I don't know how I didn't kill anybody. But I was arrested in Yorkton, Saskatchewan for a DUI. And my dogs were put in puppy jail. And I was put in the drunk tank. And those were the nicest fucking RCMP I've ever met in my life. They gave me a mat. They gave me a blanket. The next morning, they drove me to a hotel. They paid for a hotel for me. They got my dogs out of little puppy jail. They bought me some dinner. And I had to wait for a friend to come pick me up. So I got back to Edmonton, and I knew what I had to do, right? God told me I had to come home. And home for me meant come back to your fellowship, come back to your children. And so that's what I did, right? I'm not gonna lie, it was terrifying at first. My ego was still this big, right? I was still fucking scared of what you guys thought about me. You know, I'd done a lot of stupid shit in between there. I don't know how many times people had picked me up for a meeting and, you know, I didn't make it, or I was high or whatever. But I kind of felt like this was my last chance. And so, you know, I came back to the rooms. And I did what you guys told me to do. You know, and I started going to a lot of meetings. And I jumped into service right away. I started doing my steps. Okay, I did half my steps and then I bailed on odds. Yeah, I ghosted her. But I finished my steps. I sat on them for a while. I'm not gonna lie, I sat on them for a while, and life wasn't going so good. And I knew that, you know, the steps were what I needed. I needed to get to step 12. I needed to have that spiritual experience, right? You know, and I think it was you, Odds, that said it to me. I think I was only about 3 months sober, and I was kind of whining. I was like, I want to do service, but I don't have the clean time. And she's like, no. You're going to be of service. You know, and service has been absolutely fucking huge for me. I did what every good addict does, and they say don't get into a relationship the first year. So I got into a relationship with someone that was continually relapsing. And he committed suicide. And I remember the night that it happened, there was a girl in our fellowship, and she was taking 1 year. And I was really, really, really trying hard to work on my relationships with women. And I fucking hated this chick. And him and I had been fighting on the phone or whatever, and I was like, no, I'm going to go to this meeting. And I get to the meeting, and I'm sitting down, and somebody's, you know, they're doing the readings or whatever, and I get the call that he's dead. And I was like, you know what? Fuck that. I'm sitting here and I'm supporting this chick. Even though I fucking hate her, that's what I have to do, right? That's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to be here to support each other. You know, and that night I had a shit ton of friends come over, you know, and watch me ugly cry and be there for me. And when I got up the next morning, it was like, okay, I just got to keep doing what I'm doing. And I had a sponsee at the time, and so I was working with her, and I kept doing all the service that I could, and I was going to a shit ton of meetings. And I don't know, it was 2 or 3 months later when I realized that, fuck, if I was going to relapse, I should have done it when he died, because then nobody would have really blamed me for doing it, you know? But I realized that, you know, I had a new way of thinking, right? Getting loaded was not my answer anymore. Being of service has done so many more things for me than just, you know, keeping me preoccupied or getting me out of myself. It's really helped me, I think, grow as a person. I've had a lot of wonderful opportunities, and I've met so many great people. I got to go to Africa earlier this year and be of service in a whole different way. And to be honest, it really shook. I don't know if I'd say that I believed in religion so much, but I was really leaning towards this idea of a Christian God and everything that encompassed, And I got to know this person while I was over there that made me realize that religion is absolutely bullshit, when it's all about my faith. That one really rocked me. I was honestly a little bit scared because I came back and I didn't want to have anything to do with praying. I didn't want to hear the word God. But it really reinforced to me that this is a spiritual program. This is absolutely a spiritual program and not a religious one. I get to see people in every aspect of recovery today. I'm just so grateful today to be in the place that I am. I just started working at the shelter in Edmonton, and I was a little bit nervous because we have a safe consumption site there, and I didn't really know how I was going to feel about that. But I realized that everybody is on a completely different path in their life, right? And we were having a bit of a discussion earlier about harm reduction and stuff like that, and I realized for me, it's not about making people abstinent, right? For me, it's about helping people be better in their lives, whatever that looks like. And I have recovery homes for women. And when I first started doing it, I was really kind of pissed off and annoyed that I had to be harm reduction, and I didn't like that. And I may not always agree with it. My program that I work is based on abstinence, right? But that's me. And I've really had to open my eyes to the fact that everyone is different, and maybe not everyone is going to be completely abstinent. But I can't block those people off from my life, right? Everybody deserves a chance, and if I can help anybody in any capacity, then I absolutely have to. I don't know, the 12 Steps of Cocaine Anonymous have absolutely saved my life more than once. And if anybody's new, especially if anybody's coming back, if anybody's struggling, please do not let your fucking ego get in the way, because it almost killed me. And today I get the opportunity to share that with the women that I get to work with. And I'm grateful for that. That's all I have. Yeah.